find John, and with his arrival, he goes into the tomb. And, just like, out of the way, John, move it, buddy. I've got to get into the tomb. I've got to see what's going on here. That's what Peter was like. He goes into the tomb and he looks at everything that's happening there. Verse 7. And the napkin that was wrapped around his head, not lying with the fine linen, but wrapped together in a place by itself. So he saw these strips of linen that were lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. And the cloth was found by itself. It was separate from the linen. Verse 8. They went in also that other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, by the way. He didn't want us to miss that. And he saw and he believed. And so finally, John, who had reached the tomb first, he saw and he believed. Now, if I want to see the resurrected Jesus, there's several things that I need. And this tells me one of those things. One of the things that I need, if I'm going to see him real in my life, is, first of all, there in your outline, I need evidence for my mind. I need evidence for my mind. Otherwise, we're just making it up. How do we know it's real? Anybody could make something up and just say it. When I say I believe in the resurrected Christ, what makes that any different from somebody saying, well, I believe that transcendental meditation has the power to change my life? What makes it different? Evidence. That's what makes it different. Something really happened in that tomb. Something amazing, something incredible. So this is a very interesting passage. Almost every commentator who writes on it notices there are three words for us to see in this passage. First of all, the word in verse 5. It says where John bent over or looked in. The word that's for see there. It's the word that means to glance or to look quickly at something. So John just kind of looked in through that opening, and he quickly just kind of looked at the place, and he just took it all in at once. Then in verse 6, it says Simon Peter went in, and he saw these strips of linen, but it's a different word. The word saw that's used there is a different word. It means to look carefully. It means to observe. It's the word that we get from what we get the word theorize from. So when he saw, he was thinking it through. He was wondering what was happening. He was coming with a theory. And then the final word that's used is in verse 8. The other disciple who had reached the tomb first went inside and saw, it says. So a third different word in the Greek language, and it says he believed. And the word means to perceive or to understand or to intelligently comprehend the truth. So in three different ways, I can take a truth that God wants in my life. I can sort of glance at it as I run by, like John did, or I can kind of gaze at it and try to figure it out. Or there's a third way, the way that John did the second time. I can get it. John said, I've got it. I believe. And he looks at it and he saw what's happening, and something clicked inside of John. Something clicked in his brain. And you've had this happen with spiritual truth before. All of a sudden you get a spiritual truth and it just clicks. It didn't make sense before. You didn't understand it, and then all of a sudden it just happens, and you see it. It kind of jumps off the page at you. And this is what John said. This is real in my life. This is going to make a difference in who I am. I see it. And it just isn't some theory. This is real. God wants us to get it. He wants us to see it. He wants us to see how it can change our lives. And a part of that is the evidence that he wants to show us. Some people I talk to think, faith means that you stop thinking. Like when you become a Christian, your brain has to just be checked in somewhere. That's not true at all. Christians are to be very thinking people. It's true, you can't come to faith by human reasoning alone. But there's no formula you can figure out that makes you come to faith. It takes trust. That's true. But it's not true that you can't think once you're a Christian. You just got to accept it all, and you don't have to think about it. It's not true that Christianity isn't reasonable. It makes sense when you start to look at what really happened, but it's not truth. There's no evidence for our faith. There are a great number of very strong evidences of the resurrection of Jesus. Historical records prove that. Just the fact that history proclaims that Jesus was resurrected. Just like human history proclaims that George Washington was the first president of the United States. You can look at the record of history. Any historian who looks at what really happened would say Jesus really lived, and the fact of his life and death are attested in history, just like any historical record that you and I believe in. Another proof is the change in the life of the disciples. That's evidence. These disciples weren't shrewd men who got together and figured out some weird way to start a new religion. Let's get our leader killed off, and then we'll go hide him in an upper room, and then all of a sudden have new hope. These were depressed people. They were hiding for fear of the Jews. All of a sudden, overnight, their lives were changed. They were out preaching on the street, Garfield, just preaching. They're not even afraid of being arrested again. What happened? The resurrected Jesus happened. That's what happened. And the third proof among many is the silence of Jesus' witnesses. Just think of this through for a moment. If you're one of Jesus' enemies, the Romans or the Jews, the Pharisees, we've been hearing so much about them in these last few chapters, and you have the disciples going around saying, he's alive. He's come up from the grave. He's resurrected. It's bringing people away from their faith to a new faith. Would you want to stop them? Well, of course. What would you do? You'd go find that dead body and come and say, hey, this guy's he's not alive. Here's his body. If I could find the dead body of Jesus and produce the ruins, that just messes up the whole thing. But they couldn't find the body because there wasn't any body there. So they tried to make sure the body would stay there. And they sealed the tomb. They sealed it, and they put these soldiers on guard. They didn't stop Jesus. They sealed the tomb from somebody trying to get in. They forgot that somebody was going to be getting out. They didn't get that. So when Jesus burst out of that tomb in resurrection, there was no body there. It's an empty tomb now. A fourth evidence amongst many is you. Your life today has been changed by the power of the resurrection. It's looking at what Jesus does in our life. And I remind you that it's not just that. Sometimes you get in an argument with somebody, an unbeliever, and they say, I believe in this, way out Eastern mystical philosophy. It's changed my life, just like your faith in Jesus does. What's the difference? The difference is an empty tomb. That's the difference. The difference is we have a reality behind our faith. The difference is Jesus is really resurrected. That's the difference. It's not just a philosophy so that we have some evidence for our mind. For John, that evidence was very powerful. And whatever it was, what Jesus had said to them had sunk in. When he went into the tomb, John saw it. And the Bible said he believed. Now, what did he see that made him believe? Was it that the stone was rolled away? No. Was it an angel? No. He saw the grave clothes lying there. And he believed. There's something about the arrangement of the grave clothes. A lot of people say that they were lying there as if Jesus had just evaporated out of them. Just came out of them immediately. Because they were folded so neatly. Not torn aside. Remember, the strips of linen would have been wrapped around the body. You couldn't get a body out of that and leave it just lying there undisturbed. So when John saw that, he believed. The evidence was enough for him to make that leap of faith where he said, I believe. Now I wonder, what if he had stopped there? What if this were all that we had of the resurrection account? But they went in and the clothes were there, the linen was there undisturbed. Think if that were true, there would have been some people who would say, well, maybe I can believe. There would have been some who would say, well, that's just not enough evidence for me. I'm glad Jesus didn't leave it there. He has a lot more to say about the resurrection. But he not only gave us evidence for our minds, but secondly, there in your outline, we also need answers for our heart. We need answers for our heart. If I'm going to believe, in a resurrected Lord, the difference he can make in my life, I need answers for my heart. I need to see